No, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not the President of the United States, but election overload. Welcome to another edition of the Line of Scrimmage. I am Ryan Neff. In case you're wondering, if you're keeping track tallies, right now Trump has 32 electoral votes to Harris 3. So many states to still come in yet with their poll updates. The swing states are going to decide this: Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Wisconsin, Nevada. So we'll keep you updated. Welcome to another edition of the Line of Scrimmage. Again, I'm Ryan Neff. Breaking news in the world of college football: the first college football playoff rankings. The bye week, as it stands now, your overall number 1 seed would be Oregon. The 2 seed is Georgia. The 3 seed is Miami. And the 4 seed would be BYU. So those would be your 4 bye weeks. First round, Ohio State would play Boise State, the 2 and 11. Or sorry, the 2 and the 12. Indiana would play Tennessee, 7-8. Texas and Alabama would play one another, go figure, 9-11. And Penn State would play Notre Dame. Penn State, the 7 seed, Notre Dame, the 10th seed. So that's as it stands now. I see Jamey Vinnick is in the green room. Before I bring him on, though, we've got to do this since we're in the mood for election music. Bring on Jamey. Jamey, how you doing?
I'm good. Excuse me. I'm good. How about you?
I'm over it. I'm just waiting for the results. As is the college football playoff committee just came out with their 12. Have you had a chance to take a look at it yet?
Yeah, I was watching the reveal live. Was not surprised by our Washington State rank. 20 in the AP, 20 in the coaches. I think 21 in the college football playoff was right around what I expected. Maybe give or take a spot or two.
So, look, Washington State. It's the Pac-2. Hopefully, they'll get all that situated as soon as possible when it comes to the newly developed Pac, whatever it's going to be. But let's talk about Washington State. Obviously, they're sitting there at 7-1. Manageable schedule the rest of the way. Oregon State might be tough, just because it's Pac-2 playing one another. So, if they were to go 11-1, I know they would have to have a lot happen. With the college football playoff committee, would at least have to take a look. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think if you go 11-1, no matter who you are, you have to at least get some kind of consideration. The problem is ultimately going to be how are they perceived by the voters, by the system. More importantly, I just was writing earlier. For them to get to that the number 12, or the way the playoff was released, number 11 spot, because Boise State's got the locked group of 5 spot, you would think as of now. They need a lot of chaos in the middle of the SEC. They need a lot of chaos in the middle of the Big 12 and the middle of the ACC. That all said, they need one of Oregon, Penn State, Ohio State, Indiana to win the Big 10. They need Miami to win the ACC. They need BYU to win the Big 12. It's almost like when you're looking at college basketball and you're talking about bid stealers. And, Iowa State coming back in to win the Big 12, that's a bid stealer because they get the automatic bid by winning the conference.
Right.
If someone like an Alabama gets back into it and steals that from Georgia, that complicates things. If SMU or Pitt or Miami or Clemson beats Miami, that takes a spot away. So they need the top teams to stay on top. And then, like I said, they need a lot of chaos. I mean, the truth of the matter is a 2-loss Alabama team is going to get over an 11-1 Washington State team. The question from there becomes, does a 9-3 Alabama team get in over an 11-1 Washington State team? And I think there's arguments that go both ways, but I personally have a tough time believing that a 3-loss SEC team would be left out for a Washington State. That all being said, I don't think a 3-loss SEC team is making the playoff either way. So they need a lot of things it's a long-winded way of saying they need a lot of things to fall in their favor. They need a lot of teams to get to 3 or 4 losses to really have a shot to climb up any further.
Because when I take a look at Washington State overall, I mean, offensively, they're okay. It's their defense that I worry about. Defense is way in the bottom half of the rankings. Offensively, total offense, they're 24th overall from what I was seeing. The only blemish is Boise State, but look, it's Boise State. Right now, they're in the college football playoff. They've got a good win over Washington. They hammered Texas Tech, which just beat Iowa State. So really what I'm taking a look at is all these teams that they have beaten. I know they lost to Boise State by 3 touchdowns, but look, they're going to hammer Utah State. Utah State's pathetic. New Mexico, at New Mexico, might be a little tougher than expected. At Oregon State, which is always tough. And then Wyoming is not what Wyoming's been in the past. So if they can win these last 4, and they can have the likes of San Diego State and Fresno State and Boise State, Washington, Texas Tech, they keep winning. It's just going to bolster their strength of schedule.
Yeah, and I think that's the big thing is, Texas Tech being whatever, I think 6-3 now is really good for Washington State because there were a lot of people who thought after that game, okay, Texas Tech's going to go 3-9. This isn't going to, look all that great in a couple months. I mean, and that's happened in the past. When they went into Camp Randall and beat Wisconsin, I think Wisconsin went 6-6 that year, but it didn't quite hold the same, weight as beating a 10-win Wisconsin team. Washington State fans hate to root for Washington, but it wouldn't hurt their personal case or their resume if Washington was able to beat Oregon or Penn State. Don't anticipate that happening, but and then throughout, Hawaii potentially getting bowl eligible, that doesn't hurt them. It's not going to be a huge boost, but they beat Hawaii by 32. Fresno State getting to a bowl game, that would help. San Diego State a bowl game, that would help. So, and then, I think the big thing is the margins in these last 4 games, I think, will be important. If they eke out wins, in a couple of these last games like they've done on the road this year, that's probably going to be a nail in the coffin. Obviously, they have to win all 4. I mean, if they stumble in any of these games and go 10-2, forget it. They're not getting in. But, a 3-point win on the road over New Mexico isn't going to hold as much weight as a 30-point win.
Right.
And kind of in that realm. So they need to really run up. I don't want to say run up the score like, there's 30 seconds left and you're still throwing Hail Marys, but they need to put up some points and they need to really, of all else, they need to find their rhythm on the road because the thing that is, I dragged them down a little bit in terms of maybe where analytics or rankings and so on is they survived San Diego State and Fresno State on the road. Those are 2 teams they probably should have beaten by more than 3 points, and they needed pretty remarkable comebacks to do so. And I think even if you look at San Jose State, who's probably going to end up in a bowl game, they were down 14 in the second half or in the third quarter, and then they needed a 52-yard field goal and a miracle 25-second drive just to get to overtime. So there's a lot of things that I think have worked for and against them, but they probably, yes, the teams that they've beaten, they need those teams to win to improve their resumes, and then they just, they need to beat down these last 4 teams.
So talk to me about obviously the offense seems to be rolling, but when you talk about the defense, again, in the bottom half of the nation in defense, the committee's going to take a look at if they run the table go 11-1, they're going to take a look at stuff like that. So where are they lacking defensive wise? I see, Washington State's always to me been a passing kind of team. They've really never had a big time running game. I know this year they're struggling a little bit in the running game, but they're throwing the ball over the place. So talk to me about Washington State, where they can improve in the run game, and then we flip it to the defensive side of the ball. What are they going to have to prove these last 4 games defensively as to impress the committee?
Yeah, well, just starting with the run game, I think it's definitely been something they've tried to emphasize. There has been Jake Dickert has said as much. They want to be able to run the ball, and they need to be able to run the ball. It's a matter for me that I've seen these last few weeks is they're at their best when they get the ball off tackle. And too often they're going inside zone, they're running up the middle, and I certainly would not try and say, oh, I know more than Ben Arbuckle does. I mean, he obviously sees something he likes in those inside zones, but from my view and, watching the tape and, just watching it live even, and then even looking at stats, on like Pro Football Focus, their best success comes running off left tackle, running behind Esapole, their standout left guard, getting Wayshawn Parker, their top running back, into space. Where they struggle is running right into the teeth of the defense. It just doesn't – they're not getting the push in the interior of the line that I think they, A, hope they would have, B, that they need to be getting to effectively do that. So I think they're going to keep pushing that run game and really try and establish it. This is a great week to do so. Utah State's giving up over 240 yards on the ground per game. I think they're 131st in the country. This is the type of game where they really need to establish a run game, get it on tape, because that opens up other parts of the passing game and their quarterback draw game, which they, really, really try and emphasize too. Mm-hmm. On the defensive side, it's almost a tale of like 3 seasons in that sense, where maybe even 3.5. They give up 30 to Portland State in the opener. A lot of that came in garbage time. There wasn't a whole lot of concern there. Then they hold Texas Tech and Washington to 35 total points. Granted, Texas Tech was without Taj Brooks. As we've seen, Washington's offense is pretty hit or miss. But then they follow that by 52 to San Jose State, 45 to Boise State. And it's like, oh boy, this defense, particularly the tackling, is an issue. Well, then they've followed that up now with 3 pretty solid defensive performances. Holding Fresno State to 17, Hawaii to 10, and then San Diego State to 26. That was boosted a little bit by some field position and so on. So the last 2 weeks, we've really seen them get after the passer a little bit more. That was a huge issue the first 4 to 5 weeks. I think the cornerback coverage is good. The safety coverage, especially when they're in man, tends to be a little iffy. And then the overarching issue has been the tackling. And I think the last few weeks, it's gotten better. It's still not great. They're still one of the worst tackling teams statistically in the country, but it's not as egregious as it was against an Ashton Genty, for example, where I think he broke 22 tackles. And that's part of it is that's what he does. But it was that game kind of highlighted or spotlighted, maybe the better way to say it, what had been an ongoing issue. So the defense, in my opinion, is showing signs of going in the right direction. And if the pass rush that they've started to put together, particularly from the interior, I mean, Ansel Dinbu, their starting defensive tackles, got 5.5 tackles for loss and 4.5 sacks in the last 2 games. I mean, which is just, those are great season numbers for a defensive tackle. And he has really found his rhythm getting to the passer. I think if that continues to build, that's how their defense can kind of stabilize and be a force these last 4 games.
If anyone's keeping track, anybody wants to know, Trump with 105 electoral votes, Harris with 31, sort of going to plan like it always does. Just looking at some of the individual stats for Washington State, if I could bring them up here. One thing that glared out at me is your running back is your leading rusher, Jamey. That sort of has to change for me. I know Parker's got 92 over carries 92 overall carries for 446 yards. But, Mateer is your leading rusher with 10 touchdowns as well. Is it just a product of the offense that they run, or are they going to have to change that going forward the last 4 games here?
I think the answer is kind of in the middle. I think they have fallen in love with the quarterback draw, and teams have realized that. And they have started to really snuff that out, and it's lost a lot of its effectiveness. I mean, early in the year, it was a huge weapon, and they gashed teams. I mean, I look at the Apple Cup, 3rd and 20, they run a quarterback draw against the zero blitz, 25-yard touchdown, ends up being a huge play in that game. So I think when I look at the way that they use Mateer's legs, the quarterback draw still needs to be used, but it needs to be used in spurts, not 2 to 3 times a drive. Like, hey, this is a good time for a 2nd and 1 type of deal, or a 3rd and 2. On the other side, I think that they want Mateer to start scrambling again a little more. He started to put the brakes on his scrambling, and I think part of that is they didn't want him taking as many hits, but he is still their best weapon as a rusher, just because of his speed, his strength, and the fact that he's doing it from the quarterback position. So I think, in a perfect world, Parker's their leading rusher, or Pulalasi or Schlenbaker or one of the running backs, but I don't anticipate that changing this year. And I think it's not one of the situations where, your quarterback leads you with rushing with 118 yards or something. It's Mateer leads him in rushing because he's, rushed for over 500 yards at this point, or almost 500 yards, I think, when you take out the sacks and so on. But I just think that is the way the offense is structured, that his legs are going to be utilized and weaponized.
Talk to me about them spreading the ball around, too. I mean, Williams has 37 catches, Hudson 40, Meredith 26. They seem to be doing the job. Look, I've always said, why not somebody from the Pac-2 going like an 11-1, making the college football playoff? I always thought it was going to be Washington State anyway. Oregon State, after what happened last year. I mean, I know Cam Ward left Washington State. We see what he's doing in Miami. I still think Miami's going to fall on their face at some point. But, again, when you look at the receiving core, Mateer seems to be spreading the ball around fairly well.
Yeah, and that is for sure. And it's reminiscent to some degree of what it was like when Mike Leach was in charge, where they were rarely going to have a 1,000-yard receiver, but they were going to have a ton of guys with 500 to 600 yards. And I think you're going to see that. Hudson and Williams are already at the 500-yard mark. They'll probably end up, with 4 games left, I think probably in the range of 800 to 900. I think Williams does have a shot maybe at 1,000. He would need 364 in the last 4 regular season games, plus a bowl game. He probably will get there. But then, Josh Meredith's probably going to get to about 600 to 700. They've only had Carlos Hernandez for 3 games, and he was supposed to be one of their top receivers coming into the season. If you look at, he's got 130 yards in 3 games, and that was without doing much the first game. You start prorating that, okay, he would have probably been around 600 to 700 if healthy. And then they find ways to get other guys involved. Trey Shackelford hasn't had a ton of reps or a ton of catches, but he seems to come up with 1 to 2 every game, and usually at crucial spots. Tony Freeman has had some big plays as a speedy slot guy. Cooper Mathers has been their best red zone target. I mean, he's got 8 receptions and 5 are touchdowns. It's the most touchdowns by a Wazzu tight end in program history. So they're definitely finding ways to get more involved. I think the one place I personally would like to see them get a little more is using the running backs in the passing game. But just based off this year and last year, for that matter, it just doesn't seem like that's going to be a big part of the Arbuckle offense. That was one of my favorite things about the way Leach ran his air raid, is that, his run plays were screen plays, and get those guys into space, they're going to make plays. It seems like it's more of a secondary, even a tertiary option in the offense that Arbuckle runs. I mean, I look at last year, Nakia Watson had 24 catches, and a lot of that was Cam Ward's under pressure, just has to check it down. Parker leads the running backs this year and only has 6.
So let's break it down here before you leave. So the only hiccup I could see is against Oregon State, maybe. I just don't see them losing these last 4 games. So let's just say Washington State goes 11-1. We look at the way the college football playoff is right now. You got Boise State sitting there. They're probably going to wind up playing UNLV in the title game. Who knows what will happen in a rematch. Ohio State and Oregon are probably going to wind up playing for the Big Ten championship. It looks like Iowa State and BYU right now are on a collision course. Tennessee, still don't know what's going to happen with them. Indiana, if Ohio State knocks off them, could they make it in at large? Maybe. But Texas knocks off Alabama. Alabama's finished. Notre Dame still has some games to play. Penn State's got an easy schedule. Georgia's probably going to wind up playing either A&M or Texas or LSU in the SEC title game. Again, you look at Miami. They're going to have to play the likes of maybe an SMU. Oregon's going to be in regardless. So if Washington State does go 11-1 and some of these other teams lose, Alabama's going to have 3 losses. Let's say Indiana gets knocked off. They're 11-1. Washington State's 11-1. Let's say Boise State loses to UNLV in the title game. You look at like the likes of Miami. Let's say Miami loses to SMU. I know there's a lot that's going to have to happen, but if things fall into place, again, like I said in the beginning, the College Football Playoff Committee would have to really take a look at Washington State. They can only play who's on their schedule. They're 11-1 with the crap that they've been through. Why not Washington State?
I would agree with that, and I think the problem that they'll run into is just again that they don't have a Power 5 strength of schedule. That Team X that's 10-2. Well, they played in the Big Ten or they played in the SEC or so on and so forth, and and to be brutally honest, I do get that. I think a lot of people a lot of Washington State fans may remember in 2018 where they were 10-2 and got left out of the New Year's Six games for 9-3 SEC teams, and that was a frustrating point for the Cougars, who I can't remember off the top of my head who was picked over them, but there was at least 2 9-3 teams from the SEC that got into New Year's Six games, and I think a lot of the belief was, well, they're in the SEC, and the Pac-12 had its perception at that time, although that was a really good Pac-12. And obviously Washington State could have won the Apple Cup. That would have changed things as well. But I think it was Florida went 10-3 or went 9-3 in the regular season, but it held a win over LSU, and that propelled them into the New Year's Six, when I think Washington State's case was, well, we only have 2 losses. Or LSU was another one, actually. I think LSU got into the Fiesta Bowl, based off a win over a couple early season wins. So I'm going off on a tangent there, but I think overall it's it's going to have to be 11-1 with a lot falling into place, and even then, it might not be enough. I mean, it were a different story if they're 12-0. I think we're having a different conversation, but a one loss. It's all the times you see a 1-loss Mountain West team that doesn't win their league. Or didn't get the Group of 5 New Year's Six game, get left out. It kind of feels like that this could trend that way, and Washington State could be left, as maybe the 14th or the 15th or team, and it's like, well, if we'd gone to 24, Washington State would be in, that kind of thing. But right. It's possible. I just at this point, I would say it's pretty unlikely that they wind up in the college football playoff.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's Jamey Vinnick. I forgot to read this from the opening. He's an award-winning beat writer for @CougFan.com, at WSU Pullman alum, hashtag RIP3, hashtag LLBB, hashtag PVE, Viva the Underdogs. Jamey, thanks for coming on. I'm sure you're probably tired of all the election. We won't have to hear any more election commercials anyway.
Thing I'm looking forward to most about, tomorrow.
Well, enjoy the rest of the season, man. I'll pick your brain when we start getting to the bowls.
Sounds good. Happy to do it anytime.
All right, Jamey, thanks.
Yep.
Jamey Vinnick, ladies and gentlemen, covering Washington Cougars football. Hey, what the hell? Why not? 11-1, Washington State. Look, I know their schedule's not what some of these others are, but look, of all the other teams from the Pac-12 that bolted, for them to go 11-1, that's a hell of a season for Washington State. So I think they can win the last 4 games. Coming up at 8:30, hopefully, Scott Wright. He covers Oklahoma State football, not the season that they were looking for. He's a football writer for the Oklahoman. His opinions are his, RT's are not. His email address would be swright@oklahoman.com. Let's go to the election board. Still, Trump with 105 electoral votes to Harris's 31. Many states need to come in yet. The forecast right now is Trump 230, Harris 226. The swing states that are in play that will decide this election are Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia. So right now, neck and neck. Those swing states that will decide this particular election. A lot of red states that you would, that are traditionally red states anyway. Blue states, traditionally blue. So we'll see. It's going to be a long night. I'm sure everybody, election overkill. But again, the college football playoff rankings came out. Right now, the buys would be Oregon, the number 1 overall seed, Georgia the 2, the Miami the 3, the BYU's the 4. Ohio State right now, the 5th seed, would play the 12th seed Boise State Broncos. And I'm trying to read this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes. No. Sorry, I'm squinting because I'm blind at 56. So 7 seed Penn State would play the 10 seed Notre Dame. Yes, 5 seed Ohio State would play the 12 seed Boise State. 6 seed Texas would play the 11 seed Alabama, which okay. And the 8 seed Tennessee would play the 9 seed Indiana. This is going to change in the last 4 weeks of the season. Hopefully, Scott will be on around 8:30. I'm going to try to blow through these here. Look at it from last week. Illinois lost to Minnesota. It was a back and forth game. Minnesota with the big win. Both teams are now 6-3. Minnesota 4-2 in the Big Ten. Illinois now 3-3 in the Big Ten. Army without their starting quarterback beat Air Force 20-3. They struggled offensively, which you would think, not having your starting quarterback. Army's 8-0 overall. Air Force falls to 1-7. Ole Miss had themselves a day against Arkansas. They beat them 63-31. It wasn't close. Ole Miss came into play, blew them out. The SMUs beat the Pittsburghs 48-25. It wasn't close. It was 31-3 at the half. Pitt had a couple of pick sixes, and it was all over. SMU is now 8-1 overall, 5-0 in the ACC. Pitt 7-1 overall, 3-1 in the ACC. Right now, SMU and Miami are on a collision course to play in the ACC championship game. Big upset for me. 2 of them, actually. This is one of them. Houston beat Kansas State 24-19. Houston came to play. Shame on Kansas State. Houston took over in the second half. Kansas State with a couple turnovers. Houston now 4-5 overall, 3-3 in the Big 12. Kansas State now 7-2 overall, 4-2 in the Big 12. Really don't control their destiny anymore for a Big 12 title. Indiana pasted Michigan State 47-10. Michigan State was actually up 10-0 after the first quarter. And then Indiana finally woke up. The defense shut Michigan State down. They went 47-10. Indiana 9-0, 6-0 in the Big Ten. Michigan State falls to 4-5, 2-4 in the Big Ten. I'll get back to these in just a minute here. But I see my friend Scott Wright is in the green room. Again, I played Hell to the Chief in the beginning. So look, if we're going to keep doing like theme music and stuff, we got to hit him with this. Let's bring him on. It's Scott Wright. Scott, how you doing?
Ryan, I'm good, man. That was good. I like it.
If anybody wants to keep track, it's Trump with 105 electoral votes, Harris 31. I don't know what the over/under is. Hope you bet wisely. Scott, when we talked in the summer, we were talking about Oklahoma State's experience coming back. We were talking about Big 12 championship or bust. Scott, what the hell happened?
Bust. It was bust. That's what happened. It all busted.
Start off 3-0. Could have won the Utah game. You get pasted by Kansas State. West Virginia was a debacle. They could have won the BYU game. Baylor was nip and tuck, and then you lay an egg against Arizona State. I was trying to take a look at the overall stats. Look, they can't do anything offensively. They can't do anything defensively. They are dead last in rushing with Ollie Gordon as your running back. What? I don't even know where to start. What happened after they beat Tulsa?
You know, it's an excellent question because other than the first half against Arkansas when Alan Bowman, he was like 9 of 18, threw a pick, had a little bit of a shaky performance, but he came back. They had a big rally in that game. You thought they had, gotten back on track. He was great against Tulsa. And I mean, Tulsa is not a great program right now, but just going out and making throws, they looked good. So you go into that Utah game thinking that they've got things figured out in terms of how people are going to be defending them, which was to load the box and take away Ollie Gordon and give them one-on-one opportunities outside with some great receivers. And it just, for whatever reason, just all fell apart for Alan Bowman. He was missing throws, inconsistent, throwing picks again, which was an issue for him last year, and just could not move the offense. And gets benched against Utah in the second half, actually comes back in that game, almost leads a big rally for them to make a comeback. Of course, at the time, we didn't know how bad Utah's offense was, so you thought that was a really great performance from the defense. It turns out it wasn't all that great. And then it's just been unsettled at the quarterback position. They finally decide to pull the trigger and go with Garrett Rangel as the starter there at BYU, and late second quarter, he has this big 54-yard run, gets tackled hard and busts his collarbone. So now they're back to Bowman. Their other young backup that they're really excited about, Zane Flores, has been out now, hasn't played at all this season, had foot surgery actually the week before the BYU game, which was a little bit rough. So it felt like you lost two quarterbacks in 1 week. So now they're just trying to limp through and try to avoid not losing every game in the Big 12 at this point.
Mike Gundy, just quote unquote here. What's important for all the Oklahoma State fans to know is what we're very aware of what's going on. And at some point in life, we all have to put trust into somebody. And I think they need to trust that we have a good plan for what's going on here in the big picture, and we have answers. Sometimes they're not short-term. Sometimes they might be long-term answers. And he goes on to say, kind of the synopsis of all this is that this place has had tremendous success for 18 and a half years or 19. He says, I can't do the math real good. Unfortunately, in life, most people are weak, and as soon as things start to not go as good as what they thought, they fall apart and then they panic. My rebuttal to him would be, we're the Big 12 championships. For all the success that you've had, yes, you've won a lot of games, you've made bowl games, but where in the hell are our Big 12 championships, especially with Oklahoma and Texas gone now? And you have a BYU team that comes in. You have an Iowa State team. I get it, they just lost. But look, BYU is either going to wind up playing Iowa State or possibly Kansas State. What would the fans say to Mike Gundy if they had a chance to say something to Mike Gundy after listening to this?
And you left out the one line that all the fans really love is the one about how the people who complain are the same people who can't pay their bills, and I think he slipped the word failures in there somewhere in describing them. And I want to come back to that to his monologue there yesterday. But to answer your question, this has been very interesting because the fan base generally over the last few years really has been pretty split on Mike Gundy. There's a core part of the fan base that loves him for what he's done and feels like he should get to be Oklahoma State's coach for as long as he wants to do it because he's taken them somewhere that they had never been before. And that's all accurate. There's another side of the fan base that's kind of a two-part thing. One, are just tired of his antics and the goofy things that he says like this, or things he said back at Big 12 Media Days when we was trying to make light of Ollie Gordon's DUI arrest, things like that. There's people that are tired of that stuff. There are the other people that just sort of think that he's done all he can do. He's taken Oklahoma State as far as he can, and they want to see what the next step could be. So the funny thing though about it is all of those groups were all offended by what he said yesterday on Monday afternoon, and this was clearly something that now there had been a little bit of talk about kind of the outward perception of the program going through the 6-game losing streak, things like that. But this was clearly something that he had loaded in the chamber, ready to go yesterday, because I asked the question that led to this response. 800 word, like 4.5 minute response. The question had nothing to do with anything that he talked about. My question was actually very generic because I asked him because let me kind of set the table for this. He keeps a very emotionless face after losses for the most part. And that irritates some of the fan base. They'd like to see a little bit more emotion out of him, which I understand. But he feels he needs to be the strong front for the program. So he needs to kind of downplay, any sky is falling type of stuff. So he's kind of doing that a little bit. And but I asked him, I said, early in your assistant coaching career, you were on a lot of bad teams. Did going through those years help you in how you manage, the ups and downs as a head coach? And he briefly answered that, and then quickly turned into the stuff that you were reading from there, where he goes in on the fan base. And so it was clearly something that he needed to get off his chest, and it has unified the fan base in their annoyance with Mike Gundy right now.
The quote that you're talking about, he said, in most cases, the people that are negative and voicing their opinion are the same ones that can't pay their own bills. They're not taking care of themselves. They're not taking care of their own family. They're not taking care of their own job, but they have an obligation to speak out and complain about others because it makes them feel better. But then in the end, when they go to bed at night, they're the same failure that they were before they said anything negative about anybody else. That's not going to go over well at any job. No. All right, they've got TCU, they've got Texas Tech, and then they play Colorado. Dare I say it, that they could be staring 3-9 in the face?
They absolutely could, and it's a scary sight right now. For a long time, Arizona State looked like it was going to be the easiest win on this schedule, and obviously they're playing much better. For one, what Kenny Dillingham is doing there is really impressive. Number two, Cam Scatterbo, running back, that he was the biggest threat to Oklahoma State of anybody on their schedule, because he's such a talented running back. They're having all kinds of trouble stopping the run, having all kinds of trouble with missed tackles, and he's just the worst recipe for that, because he can just run right through guys. And so that was and it was homecoming last week in that game, and that's always a good boost of energy, but it just wasn't there. And now you look ahead, TCU, it's hard to know what to think about them. They've been kind of erratic, but I mean, they're a double-digit favorite at home this week against the Cowboys. They can obviously throw the ball around the yard better than anybody that OSU has played this year with Josh Hoover. So they've got the capabilities of attacking, and there's just no reason to go into this game having much confidence in Oklahoma State on either side of the ball. You mentioned Texas Tech; they're sort of in that same realm with TCU. That they've got some good wins, they've got some losses that make you raise your eyebrows a little bit. But then Colorado, it was I might have been on your show when I joined you back in the summer, that you didn't know if they were going to be trying to go 10-2 or 2-10 by the time Oklahoma State got there, and it looks more like it's going to have a chance at 10-2, or at least threatening to maybe make a run at the Big 12 title game by the time Oklahoma State gets there on Thanksgiving weekend. So that's going to be a very difficult game, because there's a lot of talent on that Colorado roster.
Ollie Gordon only has 593 yards rushing. Scott, why?
That's the offense is the hardest thing to explain. There are some reasons you can explain why the defense is as bad as they are, and they're miserably bad. There's only one team in the country, no Power 4 teams in the country they're giving up more yards than Oklahoma State defensively. But back to your question on Ollie Gordon, it makes no sense, because you basically returned the entire team. They have a new tight end on offense. That's essentially the only change in the starting lineup, other than what the changes they made now, whether it's with Bowman, getting benched for a while, or injuries that they've had to make some replacements. So the entire offensive line, all sixth-year seniors, most of them guys that have been at OSU for their entire careers, only a couple of transfers in the group, and so it's just baffling. Now, I mean, you can look back at last year, and last year was such an odd season. The first 3 games, they're doing this quarterback rotation with 3 different quarterbacks. Fourth game, they finally settle in, and they didn't really run Ollie a whole lot in those first 3 games either. He only had 19 carries over the first 3 games total last season. So you get to that fourth game, and it was like this whole new offense emerged, and then they went on this crazy run for about the next 6 games, with one exception, and were just about Ollie was just about unstoppable. Then teams adjusted, and his yards per carry dipped. They were over 6 for that 5 or 6 game span there in the middle of the year. Last few games, they dipped down closer to 4, and so that's kind of what you're seeing now. But last year, Alan Bowman was throwing the ball a lot better. He was making plays. That hasn't gone their way. They cannot get the running game going at the same level, and now teams aren't really even having to stack the box to take away the run. They were able to just play their base defense and do their regular stuff, rather than trying to trick something up that's gonna slow Ollie down, because the offensive line just isn't opening enough holes. And it's so hard to try to explain why, because it does not make any sense.
I'm hearing Jeff Monken's name being floated out there as the next possible Oklahoma State coach. What do we know? What are you hearing? Who would Oklahoma State go after if the boosters and the higher ups decide to say, Mike, thank you for all you've done. We need to go in a new direction. I'm hearing Monken's name out, and then everybody else.
Yeah, I'm of the mind that I don't know that they've got the money to do it right now. This is not a big money program. Boone Pickens poured a lot of money into this program and into the university to get the athletic department where it is now, but they don't have just a huge cash reserve sitting around to pay a $20+ million buyout to let Mike Gundy go away, because he's on a contract that it's a rollover contract every year. At the end of every season, they add another year to the contract. It's a perpetual 5-year deal. So it's not like the buyout's not going down right now, unless they end up restructuring this deal somehow, something like that. Now, internally, there's been no talk that I'm aware of anything. I saw the Jeff Monken stuff as well that was floating around out there. I mean, I think if, hypothetically, if they do something, I think Oklahoma State is an attractive job on a certain level. It's not the top half of the Big Ten, top half of the SEC type program, but since 2010, they're one of the top 10 winningest programs. They just don't have a bunch of hardware to show for it. So I think that they could attract a good coach if they were to do something. I personally don't see it. I think that Mike Gundy probably has to make some assistant coaching changes, which is not something that he's a big fan of doing. He does not like firing guys. He will, even if he makes some changes, he'll probably give some guys a chance to go get another job, so that he doesn't have to just cut them loose and make changes. That said, the pace of hiring, of recruiting, of transfer portal stuff, you've got to move a lot faster than Mike Gundy would like to. So we'll see if he decides to make some staff changes. And after a year like this, if they end 3-9, 4-8, whatever it ends up being, I don't see how there's not something that changes within the program. But he's going to have to work quickly and move fast.
Does he hammer the transfer portal hard?
To an extent, I think he's definitely watching to see what's going to happen with the 105 scholarship limit. If that comes in, that's going to limit a little bit of what he can do. Now they have a huge class of super seniors that are getting ready to go out, and some other guys that are just about done with all their eligibility. So they will have some holes to fill, even if the 105 comes into effect by the end of next spring, like they're talking. So I do think that'll have to be a big part of what they do, because they're losing a lot of guys, and guys maybe you're not quite so disappointed anymore that are heading out the door. But yet you're still going to have a lot of starting spots to fill, and you're going to need some veteran guys.
Yeah, because next year, I mean, you've got the likes of Oregon on the schedule. You got Arizona, you got Kansas State, Iowa State. Texas Tech looks to be somewhat improved.
Yep.
So it's not going to get any easier next year. Your thoughts on the Big 12 the rest of the way? It looks like it's going to be a collision course between Iowa State and BYU. I was waiting for Iowa State to screw up somewhere, and they did. Don't know who it's going to be. BYU seems to be on a run, but for right now, it looks like it's going to be BYU and Iowa State in the title game.
Yeah, I've only got to watch Iowa State a couple of times just because of how the schedules have fallen. Got to see BYU in person, and that was a night when Oklahoma State was coming off a bye week, and they were making a quarterback change, and they were able to throw some wrinkles at the BYU defense that allowed them to stay in that game. And then, of course, they have the injury, and they go back to Alan Bowman, and it was suddenly something else a little bit different. And so I think that gave the OSU offense a little bit of a boost that night. But that's a really solid team. Nobody on that roster that just wows you necessarily, but they've got just a lot of really solid players, and they feel a little bit like TCU from 2022. Honestly, when I watch them. So that's the team that I'm watching. I think Kansas State is the most talented team in the conference, but they've got to go get it done. I mean, losing at Houston is not the way to get to the Big 12 title game. So we'll see what they do from here. And like I mentioned earlier with Colorado, I'm going to be keeping an eye on them if things break the right way. They've got the potential to go make a run here in November, and like I said, be playing for a spot in that Big 12 title game when Oklahoma State comes to Boulder on Thanksgiving weekend.
Before I let you go, did you have a chance to take a look at the initial college football playoff rankings?
I didn't. I was so I've got a 15-year-old son who has just now become very interested in the presidential election.
Okay.
So we were having some electoral college discussions and things like that. I haven't had a chance to look at it. I saw the top 4 popped up on my phone, but haven't seen anything beyond that yet.
All right. So as it stands today, Oregon's the overall number 1, Georgia's the 2, Miami's the 3, BYU's the 4. They get the buys. Right now, the first round would be, if it started today, Ohio State would play Boise State, 5-12. The 6-11 would be Texas, Alabama.
Ooh.
The 7-10 would be Penn State and Notre Dame, and the 8-9 would be Tennessee and Indiana. I would tell all the fans, don't pay any attention to this because we still got 3-4 weeks left of college football. This is all going to change.
Oh, yeah.
So just try not to pay any attention to this. But I was kind of struck that you don't see any Texas A&M anywhere.
Right.
I know they've got the 2 losses. I'm surprised they got Alabama 11th, but I'm going to assume that they're going off past experience.
Right.
The Indiana, Tennessee, even if Indiana loses to Ohio State and they're a 1-loss Big Ten team, I still think they're going to make it.
Yeah.
You don't know what's going to happen with BYU. Let's say BYU loses to Iowa State. So again, all this is going to change. And look, if by some miracle SMU and Miami meet and SMU knocks off Miami, College Football Playoff Committee is going to have a real mess on their hands. Even after championship week, they're going to have a real mess. So, and again, I'm glad they went to 12, but the 13th guy and the 14th guy, they're going to be pissed off just as much as they were last year with the 5th and 6th place guys. So
exactly. And you know what, with the Big 12 is probably playing themselves out of that extra spot with the way they're beating up on themselves right now.
If anybody wants to know, Trump won 11, Harris 31 electoral votes. Still a lot of precincts. Listen to me. Still a lot of states to check in. Again, this is all going to come down to Nevada, Wisconsin, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan. So, you obviously went out and voted today?
I did. I absolutely did. Yes. Okay.
And obviously everybody's safe because I saw the tornadoes out in the Midwest.
Yeah, crazy time. I woke up to a tornado warning. What was it, 2 days ago, I guess, or yesterday, Monday morning, 6 a.m. Tornado possibilities coming through. It was frightening this time of year.
Enjoy the rest of the election. We won't have to hear any more commercials after today.
That's right.
Enjoy the rest of the Big 12 season, and once the bowl games start, I'll have to pick your brain about the teams that do make bowl games and your thoughts. So enjoy it with your son, man.
Awesome. I appreciate it, Ryan. We'll see you.
Hey, Scott. Have a good one. That's Scott Wright, covers Oklahoma State football. Not the season they were hoping for, obviously. Again, if you want to know, right now the projected electoral votes, Trump right now at 230, Harris at 226. The swing states, ladies and gentlemen, again, will decide this. Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia. Polls in some of these states have been closed for almost an hour. Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia, obviously. Let's go back to college. I left off Clemson losing to Louisville 33-21. Clemson reverted back to their old ways. The game wasn't even close. Louisville drubbed them. Clemson does not control their own destiny anymore. Too many mistakes on Clemson's part. Louisville came to play. Louisville 6-3 overall, 4-2 in the ACC. Clemson is 6-2, 5-1 in the ACC. Another big upset, Texas Tech over Iowa State. This was nip and tuck the whole way. Texas Tech just made one more play than Iowa State. Iowa State stubbing their toe like they always do. Texas Tech 6-3 overall, 4-12, 4-2 in the Big 12. Iowa State now 7-1, 4-1 in the Big 12. Texas A&M with the upset. South Carolina hammers the hell out of them. We'll have to see what happens in the SEC because it's a mess now. But look, South Carolina came to play. A&M didn't. South Carolina is 5-3 overall, 3-3 in the SEC. Texas A&M is 7-2 overall, 5-1 in the SEC. Tennessee took care of business against Kentucky in the second half. Kentucky was actually up. Tennessee pulls away, though. They win 28-18. Tennessee 7-1 overall, 4-1 in the SEC. Kentucky drops to 3-6 overall, 1-6 in the SEC. Miami involved in another wild one. They beat Duke 53-31. Miami now 9-0 overall, 5-0 in the ACC. Duke 6-3, 2-3 in the ACC. Ohio State beat Penn State 20-13. People are all over James Franklin. He gets into a shouting match for some fans afterward. I don't blame him. But look, the narrative is going to be that James Franklin can't beat Ohio State, Michigan, rightly so. But look, Penn State's most likely going to win their last 4 games, and they will make the college football playoff. Ohio State and Penn State, 7-1 overall, 4-1 in the Big Ten. My Florida Gators lose to Georgia, 34-20. DJ Lagway gets hurt for Florida, and all goes to hell. Georgia 7-1 overall, 5-1 in the SEC. Florida 4-4, 2-3 in the SEC. Oregon blasted Michigan 38-17. Oregon 9-0 overall, 6-0 in the Big Ten. Sorry, I'm squinting. Michigan 5-4 overall, 3-3 in the Big Ten. Boise State handled San Diego State 56-24. Boise State now 7-1 overall, 4-0 in the Mountain West. San Diego State 3-5, 2-1 in the Mountain West. Let's jump ahead to week number 11. There's only 3 more weeks left in the regular season. Actually, no, I lie. There's 4 weeks left. I will go down the top 25 as they're going to be played on Saturday at 12 o'clock on Fox. Ohio State hosts Purdue. Ohio State's favored by 38. Purdue's horrible. I think Ohio State's going to cover. I don't know. They're normally not real good against the spread that high. But just for shits and giggles, I'll go Ohio State 50, Purdue 10. Miami hosts Georgia Tech. I'm sorry, Georgia Tech hosts Miami. Miami's favored by 11. At some point, it's going to catch up with Miami, but I don't think this is the week. Although Georgia Tech's going to be a tricky game. They can score. But I'll go Miami 35, Georgia Tech 27. My Gators travel to Texas. That's also at 12 o'clock. Texas is going to steamroll them. Texas favored by 21.5. Florida just looking for answers. Texas 42, Florida 17. Big one in the SEC. Number 3, Georgia travels to 16, Ole Miss. August favored by 2.5. Look, Ole Miss could really throw a wrench into things here, but Georgia's just playing too well. Carson Beck's got a limit on the interceptions. He limits the interceptions. Georgia will win. I'll go Georgia 37, Ole Miss 24. 3:30, CBS. Michigan travels to Indiana. My gut's telling me Michigan, but my head's telling me Indiana. Indiana favored by 14. Michigan has just an issue right now, program-wise. They're trying to rebuild. Indiana 34, Michigan 17. 3:30 p.m. on FS1, Iowa State travels to Kansas. Iowa State's only favored by 3. Need to see how Iowa State's going to react to losing to Texas Tech. Iowa State 30, Kansas 20. 3:30 p.m. on ESPN, number 23, Clemson travels to Virginia Tech. Clemson's favored by 6.5. Didn't like what I saw out of Clemson last week. I'm going upset. I'm going to go Virginia Tech 29, Clemson 26. 3:30 p.m. ESPN 2. Number 25, Army travels to North Texas. Army favored by 5.5. Hopefully, Army gets its starting quarterback. If they do, Army wins this game. Army 30, North Texas 20. 4 o'clock on Fox. Number 20, Colorado travels to Texas Tech. Colorado's favored by 3.5. This is all predicated on Shedeur Sanders playing. Even if Shedeur doesn't play, or if he does play, I'm going to take Texas Tech in the upset. I'm going to go Texas Tech 31, Colorado 27. 7 p.m. on the Big Ten Network. Maryland travels to Oregon. Number 1, Oregon. Oregon's favored by 25. Forget about it. Oregon 45, Maryland 17. 7 p.m. on ESPN. Number 7, Tennessee hosts Mississippi State. Mississippi State's just trying to get the season over. Tennessee's favored by 24. Tennessee 45, Mississippi State 14. 7:30 p.m. on NBC. Florida State travels to Notre Dame. Florida State season to forget. Notre Dame favored by 26.5. Notre Dame 45 at Florida State 17. 7:45 p.m. Oklahoma travels to Missouri. Number 24, Mizzou. Oklahoma is actually favored by 2.5. Until Oklahoma can prove it to me. Missouri 30, Oklahoma 21. 8 o'clock on Peacock. Washington travels to Penn State. Number 6, Penn State. Penn State favored by 13. Penn State licking their wounds. Washington will be game. I think Penn State gets back to basics this week. Penn State 37, Washington 20. 8 o'clock on Fox. Nevada travels to number 12, Boise State. Boise favored by 24. Boise State 38, Nevada 10. 8 p.m. on the ACC Network. Virginia travels to take on number 18, Pitt. Pitt favored by 7.5. Again, how's Pittsburgh going to respond? I'm going to go Pittsburgh 31, Virginia 17. 10:15, the Holy War. Number 9, BYU travels to Utah. Utah not having the season that they wanted. BYU, again, favored by 4. Emotional rivalry. Utah will probably be game for a while, but I'm going to go BYU 33, Utah 20. 10:30 p.m. on the CW Network. Utah State travels to number 21, Washington State. Washington State favored by 20.5. Utah State, not good. Washington State 47, Utah State 10. Which brings us to the game of the week and another edition of they get the finger, or you get the finger, or the team gets the finger. At 7:30 p.m. on ABC and ESPN Plus, we've got the 11th ranked Tide traveling to number 15 LSU. Alabama is favored by 3. Night game, Baton Rouge. Both teams are going to be game. But ladies and gentlemen, if I can pull it up here. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. LSU, you get the finger. I would normally play music here, but for some odd reason, it would not load the music. So I'll disappear for just a second. The other Tigers. That's right. LSU, you get the finger. LSU will win this game 30-27 over Alabama. That's right. I said it. Ladies and gentlemen, enjoy the rest of election night. If you want an update, it is still Trump with 111 electoral votes, Harris 31. We got 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, trying to see how many states are left. A lot of the Midwest, obviously. A lot of the West still have to check in. Maine hasn't checked in. New Hampshire hasn't checked in. New York, PA, Ohio, Michigan, Virginia, North Carolina. It's going to be a long night election-wise. This might actually go into late tomorrow. So again, everybody, enjoy election night. Hopefully I will see everybody tomorrow in the locker room. Much to discuss. Joel Embiid gets suspended. Like I said, the Sixers should just cut ties with him, though they won't. A lot of NFL trades, the trade deadline today. We'll get into all that. But again, enjoy the rest of election night. Hope everybody voted. Show compassion toward people. Show empathy. Tell somebody you love them. Hug somebody today. Treat everybody with kindness. I will see everybody hopefully tomorrow.